The cold metal of the prison gate clanged shut behind me. But it wasn't the sound that made my blood freeze. It was the sight of her standing beside my parents' car, wearing the pearl necklace that had been my grandmother's. The necklace I was supposed to inherit on my 21st birthday. The necklace Vivian now touched with those perfectly manicured fingers, the same fingers that had typed the lies that sent me here. Halena, my mother's voice carried across the prison parking lot, but there was something wrong with her tone. Not relief, not joy, obligation. 2 years. 2 years of concrete walls and fluorescent lights, and the constant smell of industrial disinfectant. 2 years of being called inmate 47291 instead of daughter. 2 years of watching other girls get visits while mine dwindled to nothing after the first month. I walked toward them, my state-issued clothes hanging loose on my frame. I'd lost 20 pounds. My hair, once thick and glossy, now hung in limp strands past my shoulders. But my eyes burned with a clarity I'd never possessed before. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Dad said, but he couldn't meet my gaze. Instead, he kept glancing at Vivian, who stood there with that same innocent smile I remembered. The smile that had fooled everyone. The smile that had destroyed my life. "Thank you for picking me up," I said softly, because 2 years of surviving had taught me when to speak and when to observe. Right now, I needed to observe everything. Vivian stepped forward, and I caught a whiff of the expensive perfume she was wearing. Chanel. The same brand Mum used to buy for special occasions, back when I was still her daughter and not her shame. "Halena, I'm so glad you're out," Vivian said, her voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. "I've missed you so much. We all have." The lie rolled off her tongue so effortlessly. This was the girl who had systematically destroyed every relationship I'd ever had, who had manipulated our parents into believing I was the problem, who had planted evidence of embezzlement in my college computer and called the police herself. "Have you?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "That's kind of you to say." Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion? No, not yet. But she was studying my face, looking for the broken girl she'd expected to collect from prison. The ride home was suffocating. Mum kept glancing back at me through the rearview mirror, her lips pressed into a thin line. Every few minutes, she'd start to say something, then stop herself. Dad drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. Only Vivian seemed comfortable, chattering about her upcoming graduation from law school, my law school, the one I'd been attending before she destroyed my life, and her internship at the prosecutor's office, the same prosecutor's office that had put me behind bars. "Of course, I'll be specialising in white-collar crime," she said, turning in her seat to look at me with those wide, innocent eyes. "After everything that happened with, well, you know, I realised how important it is to stop financial fraud before it ruins families." My hands, folded in my lap, didn't even twitch. 2 years of hiding emotions had made me an expert. "How noble of you," I said quietly. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Red brick colonial with the white shutters Mum had insisted on repainting every 3 years. The garden she'd once taught me to tend was immaculate, every flower in perfect alignment. But when we walked through the front door, everything was different. My childhood photos had been replaced. Where my high school graduation picture once hung, now there was a professional portrait of Vivian in a cap and gown. My honour roll certificates were gone from the hallway wall, replaced by Vivian's academic achievements. Even the small watercolour painting I'd made for Mum's birthday when I was 12, the one she'd treasured and promised to keep forever, had vanished. It was as if Halena Morrison had never existed. "We've made some changes," Mum said, following my gaze. We thought, well, it seemed better to focus on moving forward." "I understand," I said, and I did. Perfectly. They showed me to what had once been the guest room. My childhood bedroom, the one with the window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading, the walls covered with my artwork and achievements, the desk where I'd studied for the LSATs, was now Vivian's. Through the open door, I could see my old vanity, my old bookshelf, my old everything, all claimed by the girl who had taken my entire life. "We thought you'd be more comfortable starting fresh," Dad explained, not meeting my eyes. "New room, new beginning." "Fresh starts are important," I agreed, setting down the small bag containing everything I owned in the world. That night, after the awkward dinner where Vivian dominated every conversation, and my parents hung on her every word like she was their real daughter, I lay in the narrow twin bed and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the soft murmur of voices from downstairs, my parents and Vivian having their nightly chat, the family ritual I'd once been part of. I waited until I heard footsteps on the stairs, doors closing, the house settling into sleep. Then I got up and walked to the window. The view was different from this room. Instead of looking out at the garden I'd helped plant, I could see the neighbour's house, where Mrs. Patterson used to wave at me every morning before school. The window was smaller, the room was smaller. Everything about my place in this family had shrunk to accommodate their new daughter. But I wasn't the same girl who had left here 2 years ago. That girl had been naive, trusting, eager to please. She'd loved Vivian like a sister from the moment my parents brought her home when we were both 16. She'd shared everything, clothes, secrets, friends, dreams. She'd never suspected that Vivian was studying her, learning her weaknesses, planning her destruction. That girl had screamed her innocence, even or as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She'd begged her parents to believe her, cried herself sick in that holding cell, refused to eat for the first week of her sentence because she couldn't understand how the world had turned so completely upside down. That girl was dead. I was someone else now. Someone who had learned to survive by watching, by listening, by never showing my true thoughts on my face. Someone who had spent 2 years planning this moment. I pulled out my phone, a basic model Mom had bought me, not the smartphone I'd once owned, and checked the time. 2:47 a.m. Perfect. Carefully, I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The house was old enough to have creaky floors, but I'd grown up here. I knew every sound it made, every board to avoid. I made my way downstairs like a ghost. Dad's study was exactly as I remembered it, down to the papers scattered across his desk and the coffee cup he never quite finished. I wasn't here for his files, though. I was here for something much more important. The family computer sat in the corner, the same one where Vivian had planted the evidence that sent me to prison. The same one where she'd crafted her careful lies, building a digital trail that painted me as a thief who had embezzled $12,000 from the charity where I'd volunteered. But Vivian had made one crucial mistake. She thought I was stupid. I'd known about computers since I was 10 years old. I'd built my own system when I was 14, had taught myself programming by 16. While she was learning to manipulate people, I was learning to manipulate data. And before my arrest, in those final panic days when I realized what was happening, I'd managed to hide something she never found. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the muscle memory of 1,000 late nights. Access the hidden partition I'd created years ago. Enter the password, a combination of numbers and letters that meant nothing to anyone but me. The screen flickered, and there it was. My insurance policy, lying dormant for over 2 years, waiting for this moment. Every email Vivian had ever sent from this computer, every deleted file, every search history entry she thought she'd erased, every single digital footprint of her systematic campaign to destroy my life, preserved in a hidden folder she never suspected existed. But more than that, evidence of what she'd been doing since I left. The real reason my parents had welcomed her so completely, why they'd been so eager to forget I ever existed. My breath caught as I scrolled through the files. It was worse than I'd imagined. Vivian hadn't just stolen my life. She'd stolen my parents' money, their retirement fund, their sense of security. She'd been bleeding them dry for 2 years, all while playing the perfect daughter. And she'd been covering it up by making them believe I was the problem child who had brought shame to their family name. Oh, Vivian, I whispered to the empty room. You really thought you were so clever, didn't you? I copied everything to the flash drive I'd hidden in my sock, then carefully closed all the programs and powered down the computer. No trace that I'd been here. As I crept back upstairs, I passed Vivian's room, my old room. The door was slightly ajar and I could hear her breathing, deep and peaceful. The sleep of someone with no conscience, no guilt, no fear of consequences. That was about to change. Back in my narrow twin bed, I stared at the ceiling and began to plan. Not the desperate emotional plotting of a wronged victim, but the cold, methodical strategy of someone who had learned patience the hard way. Someone who had spent 2 years studying human nature in its rawest form. Who had learned to read people's weaknesses like a map. Vivian had taught me well, even if she didn't know it. Every manipulation tactic she'd used on me, every psychological button she'd pushed, every relationship she'd poisoned. I'd had 2 years to analyse it all, to understand exactly how she operated. And now I was going to use that knowledge against her. The girl who had gone to prison might have been innocent, but the woman who had returned was something else entirely. I was going to dismantle Vivian's perfect life piece by piece, exactly the way she'd done to me. But unlike her, I wouldn't need to lie or plant evidence. The truth would be enough. I reached under my mattress and pulled out a notebook. Prison had taught me never to trust electronics completely. Inside, I'd been sketching out my plan for months, refining it, perfecting it, names, dates, relationships, weaknesses, a roadmap to justice. At the top of the first page, I'd written a single line. She made one mistake. She left me alive. Tomorrow, I would start playing the role of the grateful, reformed ex-convict. I would smile at Vivian's lies, nod at my parents' disappointment, accept my diminished place in this family. I would be everything they expected me to be. But underneath, I would be hunting. And Vivian Morrison, the girl who had stolen my name, my life, my family, would learn exactly what happened to people who mistook mercy for weakness. The game was about to begin. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon drifted upstairs at 7:30 sharp, the same time Mum had made breakfast for 20 years. Some things apparently never changed. I dressed carefully in the plain clothes they'd bought me, making sure to look grateful and subdued as I made my way to the kitchen. "Morning, sweetheart," Dad said without looking up from his newspaper. The financial section was spread before him, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the stock market reports with the intensity of a man watching his future disappear. Vivian sat at the breakfast bar in a crisp white blouse and navy skirt, her law school uniform. She looked up from her laptop with that practiced smile. "Did you sleep well? I know it must be hard adjusting to, well, everything." "Much better than where I've been sleeping," I replied softly, helping myself to coffee. "Thank you for asking." Mum bustled around the kitchen, her movements sharp and efficient. She'd always cooked when she was stressed, and, judging by the elaborate spread, bacon, eggs, fresh fruit, homemade muffins, she was very stressed indeed. "I've been thinking," Mum said, not quite meeting my eyes as she flipped eggs, "about what you might want to do now. For work, I mean. Obviously, the legal field is—" She trailed off, the spatula frozen in her hand. "Out of the question," I finished for her. "I understand. A felony conviction makes things complicated." Vivian's fingers paused on her keyboard for just a moment. "I could ask around at my internship," she offered, her voice dripping with fake generosity. "Maybe something in filing or data entry. Nothing that requires bonding, of course." The irony was exquisite. The girl who had committed actual embezzlement was offering to help me find work because I had a criminal record for embezzlement I didn't commit. "That's very thoughtful," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Though I wouldn't want to cause problems for you at work. People might ask uncomfortable questions." A flicker of something, Annoyance, worry crossed her features before the smile returned. Don't be silly. We're family. Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth, but I nodded as if touched by her concern. Dad folded his newspaper with more force than necessary. I need to get to the office early today. The Henderson account is demanding another review of their portfolio. He glanced at Vivian. You mentioned you had some suggestions about their investment strategy? Just a few ideas from my securities law class, Vivian said modestly. Professor Williams thinks I have a real talent for financial analysis. I watched this exchange with new eyes, seeing what I'd missed before. Dad asking Vivian for investment advice, Vivian positioning herself as the financial expert. The careful way she was inserting herself into every aspect of his business decisions. Well, I should head to campus, Vivian said, closing her laptop. She stood and kissed Dad's cheek, then Mum's. When she approached me, I tensed, but she only touched my shoulder briefly. It's so good to have you home, Halena. Really? The moment the front door closed behind her, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. Mum's shoulders sagged, and Dad rubbed his temples like he was fighting a headache. Richard, Mum said quietly, we need to talk about the credit cards again. Dad's jaw tightened. Not now, Elizabeth. When then? The Visa is maxed out, the MasterCard is nearly there, and you know what the financial advisor said about our retirement fund. My hands remained steady around my coffee cup, but inside, pieces were clicking into place. The stress lines around Dad's eyes, Mum's obvious anxiety, the way they both looked older, worn down. These things happen, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Market fluctuations, unexpected expenses. $40,000 in unexpected expenses? Mum's voice cracked. Richard, this started right around the time... She stopped abruptly, glancing at me. Right around the time I went to prison. When Vivian became their only child, their sole focus, their perfect daughter who could do no wrong. I should look for work right away, I said quietly. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Mum said quickly, but guilt was written all over her face. It's just... things have been tight. The legal fees for your case and then Vivian's education expenses. Of course. They'd paid for lawyers to defend me, then turned around and funded law school for the girl who'd framed me. The beautiful symmetry of it was almost artistic. I understand, I said. Maybe I could help around the house while I look for work. I noticed the garden needs attention. Mum's face brightened slightly. Would you? I've been so busy and you always had such a green thumb. After they left for work, I had the house to myself. Time to begin my real education. I started with Vivian's room, my old room. She'd been careless, secure in her position as the beloved daughter. Her laptop was password protected, but she'd written the password on a sticky note hidden under her keyboard. Golden Girl 2024. The narcissism was almost charming. Her email history was a masterclass in manipulation. Hundreds of messages to my parents, each one carefully crafted to reinforce her image as the responsible daughter, while subtly undermining any remaining sympathy they might have had for me. I'm worried about how this situation with Halena is affecting your health, Mum. Maybe we should focus on healing as a family instead of dwelling on the past. Dad, I know you feel guilty about Halena, but you can't blame yourself for her choices. Sometimes people we love disappoint us. I found this article about financial fraud and family dynamics. It explains how some people develop these destructive patterns. Maybe it will help you understand what happened with Halena. Each message was poison wrapped in concern, slowly eroding their connection to me while strengthening their dependence on her. But the real treasure was in her financial files. Vivian had been very busy during my absence. She'd convinced Dad to let her help with investment decisions, using her law school knowledge to guide his choices. Every recommendation she'd made had lost money. Every stock she'd suggested had tanked. Every bond fund had underperformed But here was the beautiful part. She'd been making the opposite investments in her own portfolio, shorting the stocks she recommended to Dad, buying puts on his picks. She was literally betting against my father's financial future while appearing to help him. And there was more. Credit cards opened in Mom's name, small loans taken against the house, online gambling debts that Dad didn't know existed, a systematic draining of my parents' wealth that had been going on for 2 years. She had learned well from framing me. Plant the evidence, create the story, let the victims destroy themselves trying to understand what went wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "Hope you're settling in okay. Lunch today? My treat. I know a great place near campus." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "That sounds lovely. Thank you for thinking of me." The restaurant she had chosen was expensive, the kind of place that cost more for one meal than I'd spent on food in a month in prison. Vivian was already there when I arrived, looking perfectly polished in her law student costume. "You look good," she said as I sat down. "Prison must have agreed with you?" The casual cruelty of the comment was so perfectly Vivian, testing to see if I'd react, probing for weakness. "It taught me a lot about myself," I replied mildly, "and about other people." She ordered wine, a bottle that costs more than most people made in a day. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said, leaning forward with fake concern. "It must be so hard starting over, losing everything you worked for." "Not everything," I said. "I still have my family." Something flickered in her eyes. "Of course, though I imagine it's different now. People change, relationships change, trust, once broken." She shrugged elegantly. "Is that your experience?" I asked. "That trust, once broken, can't be repaired?" "I think some betrayals are just too deep," she said, taking a sip of wine. "Some wounds never really heal." We were dancing around it now, the real conversation happening in subtext. She was telling me my place in the family was gone forever. I was letting her believe I accepted that. "You're probably right," I said. "But sometimes people get second chances they don't expect." "Sometimes," she agreed, "though usually people who make big mistakes just keep making them. It's a pattern, you know, a character flaw that never really goes away." The waitress brought our food, elaborate dishes that Vivian had ordered for both of us, without asking my preference. Another small power play, another way of establishing dominance. "I should tell you," Vivian said as she cut into her salmon. "Mom and Dad have been struggling financially. I've been trying to help, but..." She sighed dramatically. "Law school is expensive, and they're already carrying so much debt from your legal troubles." There it was, the setup for her next move. "I had no idea things were that bad," I said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Well," Vivian hesitated, as if the thought had just occurred to her. "There is one thing. I know this is awkward, but you wouldn't happen to have access to any money, would you? Even a small amount could help with the mortgage payment this month." I almost laughed. She was asking me, fresh out of prison, unemployed, possessing nothing but the clothes on my back, to give her money. The audacity was breathtaking. "I wish I could help," I said sadly, "but as you can imagine, I don't have anything to offer." "Of course," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have asked. It's just, I hate seeing them struggle, especially when..." She stopped herself. "When what?" "Nothing. It's not important." But I could read the subtext. "Especially when it's your fault they're in this position." Another knife twisted in the wound, another reminder of my supposed guilt. The meal continued with Vivian painting a picture of her bright future. Graduation in 6 months, a job lined up at a prestigious firm, plans to take care of our parents in their old age. She was positioning herself as their retirement plan while simultaneously destroying their ability to retire. "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished," I told her as we waited for the check. You've really made the most of your opportunities. Thank you, she said, preening. I've worked very hard to get where I am. The check arrived. $237 for lunch. Vivian paid with a credit card that I now knew was linked to my parents' rapidly diminishing savings. As we walked back to her car, she turned to me with that practiced expression of concern. Halena, I hope you know that I don't judge you for what happened. We all make mistakes. That's very generous of you, I said. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. If you need anything, advice, support, someone to talk to, I'm your sister. Sister? The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. Thank you, Vivian, I said. That means everything to me. She dropped me off at home with promises to catch up soon and suggestions about job opportunities she might be able to find for me. All of them, I noticed, were positions that would keep me far from any real influence or financial independence. That evening, I sat in my narrow room and opened my notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, Phase 1, documentation complete. Below that, I began listing everything I'd learned. Not just about Vivian's current schemes, but about her psychology, her weaknesses, her blind spots. The girl who had destroyed my life was brilliant at manipulation, but she had one fatal flaw. She was still underestimating me. Tomorrow, I would begin Phase 2. It was time to start gathering allies. The next morning, I walked into Brennan & Associates with my shoulders squared and my head held high. The law firm where I'd interned 3 years ago, before my world imploded, looked exactly the same. Marble floors, mahogany furniture, and the faint smell of expensive cologne mixed with desperation. Halena Morrison. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition, then quickly narrowed with judgment. What can I do for you? I'd like to speak with Mr. Brennan, please. Tell him it's about the Westbrook case. Her manicured fingers hesitated over the phone. The Westbrook case had been the firm's biggest embarrassment, a securities fraud investigation that had cost them 3 major clients and nearly resulted in sanctions. It had also been the case that taught me everything I needed to know about financial crime. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from James Brennan in his corner office. He looked older, greyer, with the haunted expression of a man who'd watched his reputation crumble. Halena, he said carefully, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. I placed a manila folder on his desk. I have information about an ongoing securities fraud case, one that could rehabilitate your firm's reputation if handled correctly. His eyes flicked to the folder, then back to my face. What kind of information? The kind that proves systemic investment fraud designed to look like legitimate financial advice. The kind that's been bleeding a local family dry for 2 years, while the perpetrator builds a portfolio worth over $200,000. Brennan's poker face was excellent, but I caught the slight tension in his jaw. That's a serious allegation. It's a serious crime. I opened the folder and spread out copies of Vivian's investment records, her recommendations to my father, and the correlation between her advice and her personal trades. This is preliminary evidence. There's much more where this came from. He studied the documents for several minutes, his expression growing more interested by the page. Where did you obtain this information? Does it matter? What matters is that it's real, it's actionable, and it's currently being committed against Richard Morrison, a respected businessman in this community. Richard Morrison. Brennan's eyes sharpened. The Morrison who owns Morrison Financial Planning? The same. I leaned back in my chair. The Morrison whose daughter was convicted of embezzlement 3 years ago, despite maintaining her innocence. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm offering you documented proof of investment fraud that's still in progress. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, studying me. What do you want in return? Justice, and maybe the chance to clear my name when the real criminal is exposed. This could take months to investigate properly, years if it goes to trial. I have time, I said simply. Patience is one thing prison teaches very well. He gathered the documents carefully. I'll need to verify this information independently. Of course, but Mr. Brennan... I stood to leave. Time is a factor. Every day she continues this scheme, my parents lose more money. And every day she remains free, she gets more confident. Confident people make mistakes. I'll be in touch, he promised. My next stop was Morrison Financial Planning, my father's firm. The office manager, Patricia Wells, had known me since I was 16 and worked here summers. Her face went through a complicated series of emotions when she saw me. Halena, honey, she said finally, I didn't know you were... I heard you were... Released? Yes, I was. I smiled gently. Patricia, I was wondering if I could ask you something about the firm's investment recommendations over the past 2 years. Her expression grew wary. I don't think I should... I'm not asking for client information. I'm asking about performance. Have you noticed any patterns, any recommendations that seemed unusual? Patricia glanced around the empty reception area, then leaned closer. Between you and me? Your father's been struggling. His investment picks have been terrible lately, almost like he's lost his touch completely. When did this start? About 2 years ago, right around the time... She stopped herself. Right around the time I went to prison, and Vivian started helping him with investment research, I finished. Patricia's eyes widened. I shouldn't be talking about this. Patricia, what if I told you that someone has been deliberately sabotaging my father's recommendations? That someone has been feeding him bad advice while profiting from his failures? That's impossible. Who would do such a thing? Someone who wanted to destroy his reputation while appearing to help. Someone who needed him to fail, so they could step in as his saviour. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Patricia had worked here for 15 years. She knew good investment advice from bad, and she'd been watching my father make increasingly poor decisions. There is something, she said reluctantly. Some of the research reports your father's been using, they don't match our usual sources. The analysis seems sophisticated, but the conclusions are almost backwards from what the data suggests. Do you still have copies of those reports? Yes. We keep everything for compliance purposes. Would you be willing to share them with a securities investigator, if one were to ask? Patricia looked around nervously. If it was an official investigation, it might be, very soon. That afternoon, I visited my old college professor, Dr. Elizabeth Cambridge, who taught forensic accounting. Her office was exactly as I remembered. Stacks of papers, cold coffee, and the intense focus of someone who lived for numbers that told stories. Halena Morrison, she said, looking up from her computer, I wondered if I'd see you again. Dr. Cambridge, I was hoping you might look at something for me. I imagine you were. She gestured to a chair. I followed your case, you know. The evidence never made sense to me. What do you mean? The embezzlement pattern, too sophisticated for the amount stolen, too obvious for someone with your technical skills. It felt like someone was trying very hard to make it look like something it wasn't. I pulled out another folder, the evidence I'd copied from Vivian's computer. What if I told you the real embezzlement was much more sophisticated and is still ongoing? For the next hour, I walked her through Vivian's scheme. The investment manipulation, the credit fraud, the systematic wealth transfer. Dr. Cambridge's excitement grew with each revelation. This is brilliant, she breathed. Absolutely brilliant and completely criminal. The paper trail is extraordinary. She documented everything. Can you help me verify the analysis? Make sure my conclusions are correct? More than that, I can model the entire scheme, project the losses, even estimate her total profits. She looked up at me with something like admiration. Whoever taught you forensic investigation techniques did an excellent job. I had a very good teacher, I said, and 2 years to practice. That evening, Vivian came home later than usual, her face flushed with excitement. She found me in the kitchen washing dishes. You look happy, I observed. Just a good day at the internship. I've been working on this fascinating case, investment fraud. The schemes people come up with are incredible. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Must be satisfying, working to catch criminals. It really is. There's something about justice, making sure people get what they deserve. I couldn't agree more, I said, drying a plate with careful precision. She studied my face for a moment. You seem different since yesterday, more settled. I think I'm finally accepting my situation. You were right about starting fresh. I'm glad. But her eyes remained suspicious. What did you do today? Looked for work, talked to some old contacts. You know how it is. Everyone wants to help, but actually finding something is harder. I'm sure something will turn up, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She wanted me unemployed, dependent, desperate. Actually, I might have a lead. Someone mentioned that Brennan and Associates might need filing help. Basic stuff, nothing requiring clearance. Vivian's entire body went rigid. Brennan and Associates? You know them? They have a reputation. Very aggressive tactics. I wouldn't want you to get involved with anything questionable. After what I've been through, I think I can handle a filing job, I said mildly. Of course, I just meant... She forced a smile. I am being overprotective. Ignore me. But she wasn't ignoring me. For the rest of the evening, I felt her watching me, studying my movements, listening to my conversations with our parents. The predator sensing something wrong with her prey. Perfect. That night, I updated my notebook. 3 allies recruited, Brennan for legal expertise, Patricia for inside information, Dr. Cambridge for forensic analysis, each one positioned to verify different aspects of Vivian's crimes. But allies weren't enough. I needed Vivian to accelerate her timeline, to make the kind of mistakes that came from panic. I needed her to believe she was about to lose everything. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. Vivian, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about trust and betrayal. You're absolutely right. Some wounds never heal. Some people never change. I'm beginning to understand that now. I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Too obvious, too direct. Instead, I sent, "Thank you for lunch yesterday. It meant so much to feel like I still have family who cares about me. I know I'll never be the daughter I was before, but maybe I can still find a way to contribute to this family's future." Her response came back within minutes. "Of course, we're sisters no matter what. I love you, Halena." Each word dripped with false affection, but underneath I could read the real message. You're broken, you're grateful, you're not a threat. Tomorrow, phase 3 would begin. It was time to make Vivian realize just how wrong she was about all 3 assumptions. I closed my notebook and smiled in the darkness. The girl who had sent me to prison was about to discover that some lessons can only be learned the hard way. 2 weeks later, everything was in place. Dr. Cambridge had completed her forensic analysis, confirming over $400,000 in fraudulent losses orchestrated by Vivian. Brennan had filed the preliminary investigation report with the Securities Commission. Patricia had quietly documented every suspicious recommendation that had passed through Dad's firm. But I needed one final piece, Vivian's confession in her own words. The opportunity came on a rainy Thursday evening. Our parents were at their weekly bridge club, leaving Vivian and me alone in the house. She'd been increasingly agitated, sensing something shifting but unable to identify the threat. "Halena," she said, finding me in the kitchen with my laptop open, "we need to talk." "Of course. What's on your mind?" She sat across from me, her perfect composure cracking slightly. "I know you've been asking questions. Patricia mentioned you visited Dad's office. Brennan's secretary said you had a meeting there." "I told you I was looking for work. Cut the act." Her voice turned sharp, the mask slipping. "I know you're planning something. The question is what?" I closed my laptop slowly, meeting her gaze. "You're right. I am planning something." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "The truth, all of it, on record." "What truth?" But her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us, hitting record. "The truth about who really embezzled money from the children's charity. The truth about what you've been doing to our parents for the past 2 years. The truth about why you framed me." Vivian stared at the recording phone, then laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "You think you're so clever, but who's going to believe you? The convicted felon with a grudge against her innocent sister? The Securities Commission for one, the FBI's white-collar crime unit for another. Oh, and the IRS, they're very interested in your unreported gambling winnings, and the offshore accounts you think nobody knows about." The colour drained from her face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. The screen displayed her hidden financial accounts, the ones she'd used to short Dad's investment picks, the gambling sites, the credit cards opened in Mum's name. "Impressive portfolio you've built, $247,000 in 2 years, all from systematically destroying our father's reputation and our parents' financial security." Vivian lunged for the laptop, but I was faster, snapping it shut. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued calmly. "You're going to confess. Everything. The frame job, the ongoing fraud, all of it. Because if you don't, I'll release everything to the authorities tomorrow morning. You have no proof that will hold up in court." "Actually, I do." I pulled out a second phone, "including this conversation, where you just tried to destroy evidence instead of denying the charges. Very telling behaviour for someone who's supposedly innocent." Vivian's composure finally shattered. "You have no idea what you're doing. I made this family better. I saved them from the disappointment of having you as a daughter." "There it is," I said softly. "Keep going." "You want the truth?" She stood up, pacing like a caged animal. "Fine. Yes, I framed you. Yes, I planted the evidence. And you know what? You deserved it." "Why?" "Because everything came so easily to you. Perfect grades, perfect recommendations, perfect future. Well, I had to claw my way up from nothing. Foster homes, group homes, families who sent me back like a defective product. Then I finally found a real family, and you were there, taking up all the space. So you decided to take my place. I decided to prove I was better, and I was right. Look at them now. They love me more than they ever loved you. I'm the daughter they always wanted. By bankrupting them, by controlling them, by making myself indispensable." Her eyes gleamed with manic pride. "Do you know how easy it was? A few bad investment tips here, a few credit cards there. Make them dependent on me for everything. Emotional support, financial advice, their entire future. And the beautiful part is, they'll never suspect me because I'm their perfect daughter. And the charity money, the embezzlement that sent me to prison. Pathetically simple. Access to your laptop, a few forged documents, some digital breadcrumbs. The hardest part was acting surprised when they found the evidence." She laughed. "You should have seen your face in court. So confused, so betrayed. It was almost sad." "Almost?" You had it coming. You and your perfect life, your perfect opportunities. You needed to learn that the world isn't fair, that good things happen to people who take them, not people who deserve them. I stopped the recording and leaned back in my chair. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed. Vivian's triumphant expression faltered. What do you mean? I mean, the FBI agents outside have been listening to every word through this wire. I pulled a small device from under my shirt. They've been building a case against you for weeks. This conversation was just the final piece. The front door opened with a crash. FBI, nobody move! Vivian spun toward the sound, her face white with shock. Agent Rebecca Torres entered first, followed by 3 other agents and Detective Mills from the local police. They'd been waiting in an unmarked van down the street, listening to everything. Vivian Morrison, Agent Torres said, pulling out handcuffs, you're under arrest for securities fraud, identity theft, credit fraud, and perjury in a federal investigation. This is a setup, Vivian screamed, looking wildly between me and the agents. She's lying. She's a convicted felon. Actually, Agent Torres said calmly, Miss Morrison's conviction is being overturned based on new evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and perjured testimony. Your testimony specifically. As they read Vivian her rights, she kept screaming denials, threats, promises of revenge. But her words were just noise now. The truth was on record, witnessed by federal agents, corroborated by months of evidence. Wait, Vivian said suddenly, her voice turning calculating. I want to make a deal. I have information about other cases, other frauds. I can help you. Agent Torres paused. What kind of information? The prosecutor who handled Helena's case, District Attorney Blackwood. I have evidence he's been taking bribes, fixing cases. I recorded our conversations. I felt my blood run cold. Even now, even caught red-handed, Vivian was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. We'll discuss that at the station, Agent Torres said, continuing with the arrest. As they led Vivian away, she turned back to me one last time. This isn't over, Halena. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've unleashed. I'm not the only one with secrets in this town. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. My parents returned home an hour later to find me sitting in the living room with the Detective Mills and Agent Torres. The conversation that followed was devastating and necessary. Dad's face aged 10 years as he learned about his financial losses. Mum cried when she discovered the credit cards opened in her name. But underneath the pain, I saw something else, relief. The confusion of the past 2 years finally made sense. The constant stress, the inexplicable financial problems, the feeling that something was wrong. It all had an explanation. Why didn't you tell us you suspected? Mum asked, holding my hand tightly. Would you have believed me? A convicted felon accusing your perfect adopted daughter? Dad winced. We failed you, didn't we? When you needed us most, we chose to believe the worst. You believed what you were manipulated to believe. Vivian is very, very good at what she does. 3 months later, I stood outside the courthouse in a navy suit, the same courthouse where I'd been sentenced to prison. But today was different. Today, the judge was formally overturning my conviction and dismissing all charges. Vivian had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The evidence was overwhelming, her recorded confession damning. She'd tried to flip on the district attorney, but her credibility was destroyed. Her claims about corruption were dismissed as the desperate lies of a convicted fraudster.